My name is Garrett Jones. I am a local author here in Hanford, California, and I have written 3 books in a high fantasy series called The Archives of Ssussdriad. For those of you who are not familiar with my made-up language, it means the 5 kingdoms. I knew pretty early on that I wanted to be a writer, mainly because I just couldn't stop from creating stories. It started off playing with little action figures and toys that I'd create my own stories and my own adventures, and then eventually got to the point where I started writing fan fiction based on some of the TV shows and movies that I liked, or creating my own characters that would interact with that world. And then eventually it got to the point where I started creating my own comic book characters in high school. It just started kind of blossoming from there. All the characters that are in my books developed originally as comic book characters that I thought would be great, and then eventually came to the point where I realized I'm a terrible artist and I have no business putting ink to paper in that format. So because I'm not that good of an artist, I decided the better medium would be to turn them into characters for a novel. And then as I was playing around with it, it took me about 4 years or so. I figured that the best format for them, the best genre, was high fantasy, medieval fantasy. The first version of the book that I had, it had like 9 protagonists, and I couldn't follow them all, and eventually as I was going through rewrites and edits, I just figured this is garbage. So I took everything I had, I set it on fire, literally, and started over from scratch. By the time I transferred schools to Monterey, I realized that I really did want to pursue creative writing as a degree and turn that into something that I could use. So I have 2 degrees. I have a Bachelor's of Arts in Human Communication with an emphasis on creative writing and social action. I spend more time focusing on the creative writing side rather than the social action. I figured for me the best thing I could possibly do is just to entertain people. And then I have a Master's of Arts in Religion with a focus on biblical studies. As far as my characters are actually based off people I knew or still know. I have a martial arts background, and one of the things that I've always tried to do is when I'm choreographing a fight sequence in my head, I actually will go through the process of choreographing how the fight would really look. So I'll get a buddy of mine who does martial arts, and we've worked through it and tried to find this is how the fight would actually play out. Try to make it as real as possible while still getting the point across that this could be entertaining. So my books are high fantasy. Right now there's 3 in a series, and the first book is about a set of heroes that are called to action 200 years after the death of this ancient warlord. Menenius was this warlord that existed 200 years before the events of the first book. And so that prologue focuses on his downfall. He made this prophecy that his heirs would take over and finish what he started. This character was terrible, but at the same time he was real, and so it's kind of hard to separate the myth from the fact, and what takes place afterwards is how people have recovered. And so this idea that he had heirs that he left behind, even though he never took a wife, even though there was no indication that he ever had kids, it's all kind of just filtered down through myth. So his heirs began building up their own alliances and their own armies. It shows that process of how they come together, and they're all power mad people, so there's this infighting that happens between them. It's very subtle at first, and then they start backstabbing one another, and all the while there's this balance of hero characters that are trying to face off against them, but at the same time they have their own destinies that kind of branch off and go in different directions. Book 2 picks up immediately after the events of Book 1. One of the hero characters, his name is Gavin. He had made a decision in Book 1 to go against completing a quest that he was given in Book 1, and he has to deal with those ramifications and learn how to cope with them as he accomplishes that goal in Book 2. And then Book 3 deals with another main character from Book 1 who is called to interact with and help save the vampires from extinction. Even though vampires have shown to be kind of a threat in the first book where they're introduced, in this case, there's a little bit more context and nuance to their race. Yeah, I'm going to be I'm going to be the artist in-house at Rock N Roll Deli, which is just right across the street. I'm looking forward to it. This is my third art hop. I did one last month. I did one a year ago in April, and I was over at DJ's Collectibles for that one a year ago. I'm looking forward to it. I think having books where people are buying food is going to be very helpful, because there's food involved, and if food is involved, people are going to be hungry. They're going to want to spend more money. So hopefully that's the goal.